Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be doing the final setup for the PCNC 440. Little final things include setting up the computer, setting up the monitor and all that stuff, the e-stop switch, and just kind of the little, things that you're going to do before you need to get it running. In addition to doing that, I'm also going to show you an introduction to PathPilot. PathPilot is Tormach CNC software. It's similar to like a Mach 3 or a Linux CNC. It is the software that's on the computer that runs the machine. In addition to that, I'm also going to flip this thing around, take off the access panels, and show you all the electronics inside. I am very much a tinkerer, and being that I've built a couple CNC machines myself, I always like to see what's inside, so I'll show you what's inside too. Before we get to all that, I also wanted to talk about a couple changes and corrections and appendums to the last video, the first of which is the feet. I said in the last video that the feet are 1/2 inch 13. They are not 1/2 13, they're actually M12 1.75. An M12 1.75 is eerily close to a 1/2 13, so they're very close, but they're not the exact same thing, so the feet are actually an M12. In addition to that, in the last video, I talked a little bit about how much space you would need and kind of the space requirements, but I never really mentioned it fully in the last video, so now that the mill is fully assembled and up against the wall, I have a better idea of how much space it really takes up. From the back wall to about here, we're looking at 34 inches. And from about the side of here to the other side, we're looking at about 42 inches. And then from the floor all the way to the top of the head at its highest point, it's about 80 inches. It's really maybe about 76, but call it 80 just for a little bit extra clearance. So 34, 42, 80 inches is about the space you need for one of these guys, in addition to, whatever tool cart or what you're going to be using for the computer and stuff. So let's dive into the final setup. Before I start anything else, I wanted to get all the packing grease cleaned off of everything, and this was kind of a pain. I just used some WD-40, soaked everything, and then just rubbed it off with some paper towels and some shop towels. The little plate that sits to the side of the mill took forever to get all that stuff off of. The actual table of the mill was a lot easier, but it just takes some time and some elbow grease to wipe everything down. After the table got cleaned up, I attached the guard onto the outside and then the little table on the left-hand side, and was ready to move on to the e-stop switch. The mill comes with this little box that is pre-wired to the electronics enclosure, and it has both the start button and also the emergency stop button on it. To attach it to the side of the enclosure, I need to drill a couple holes so that I could mount it to the existing holes on the enclosure. The first thing I needed to do then is open it up so that I could get access to, drilling the holes. I lined it up kind of roughly against the side of the mill, kind of marked a couple holes, drilled them, and, installed the screws like that. The problem is that I didn't really think about it too much, and one of the holes was way too high and kind of interfered with one of the screw pillars inside the box. So if you're doing this, make sure you pay a little bit more attention and have those holes a little bit more centered on the enclosure so you don't end up hitting that like I did. Thankfully I had one of these little thumb screws on hand, so it fit in there just fine. I didn't have to hold it when I tightened it, so worked out okay. The other thing to note too is that the top of that box can actually go both ways. You can rotate it 180 degrees, so just make sure you orient it so that the emergency stop label is not upside down. When I was putting all the accessories away, I found kind of a clever location for the clamping kit. I used 2 holes in the top of the stands, backed them off a little bit, and then put this in there and then tightened them down, so now the clamping kit is securely located on the side of the mill. I also used the handle on the clamping kit as a place to put a zip tie to secure the hose tube for the emergency stop. So just kind of one of the little things I did to give this a place to rest that's close by the mill, and I didn't have to drill any new holes. I ended up placing the computer in the bottom of the stand. The stand actually has quite a bit of room in there, and there's plenty of room for the computer to sit, and there's no real way that chips or anything can get down in there. So I just kind of tucked it down in the corner and ran the power wires out the back, and then all the other wires for like the keyboard, mouse, and everything out the side of it. I use this little split loom stuff to clean up the wires coming out of the side, and then that runs to the little stand I have. Now it's time to turn on the computer. Once the computer boots up, you see a Tormach logo show up on the screen, and then it goes into the user agreement, and you can read through the user agreement if you want, click agree, And then the next screen has you select which machine you have. This works with pretty much all the Tormach machines, so you just select which one you have. And then it wants to update the Mesa card. So it just kind of runs through this little update procedure, and once the progress bar meets the end, it tells you that it's safe to reboot the computer. You hit OK, it tells you it's safe to shut down, and then all you have to do is shut down the computer by holding down the power button for a little while, let go of it, and then turn it back on again. And after it boots up again, you'll see the same process over. You see the Tormach logo, and then you should boot directly into the PathPilot software. This is the PathPilot interface. This is the screen that it will boot to when you turn on the computer. To enable the touch screen, you actually need to do the calibration, and to do that, you go into this MDI box, which is the manual data input. So go ahead and select that and type in admin space touch screen. And when you do that, it'll run this little calibration. You touch the points, and there you go. Now your touchscreen is enabled. It actually took me a couple seconds to figure that out, and I had to go to the manual and look at that, but that will enable your touchscreen. Here you have the main screen, and this is going to show your G-code for the file that you have loaded. It's going to show your model of where the tool path actually is, and then everything else. You've got your jog settings over here, your spindle settings. This is your DRO, your digital readout to your position on where everything is, and then your kind of cycle start feed rate stuff. Here's where you can load your files. You can load them from a USB, or you can load them from a network if you have the network adapter attached. Just some basic settings, your tool offsets and your tool table. Conversation milling, I'm going to be talking a lot about this in the future videos, but this makes it easy to run little basic programs without having to write them or without having to use a CAM software for it. Then you got your probe screen, and then just your overall status. Now if I go ahead and hit reset to enable the machine, you see this status saying that it failed to communicate. There's a little bit of a sequence that you need to do to turn on the machine. You need to first turn on the main power switch, make sure the e-stop is disengaged, and then go ahead and press the green button. Now, when I hit reset, we're good to go. So the machine is now controllable, and I can go ahead and reference the axes. And there, the machine is now referenced. I'll be covering PathPilot in more depth in future videos, but this gives you a brief overview of at least what the interface looks like. I really wanted to see what was inside the electronics enclosure, so I flipped the mill around and undid the access panels. There was just a lot of Allen head screws along there, so I just undid those slowly and removed the panels. There's a lot of really cool stuff in the back of the cabinet. Let's look at it in a little bit more detail. So this is the back of the mill with the access panels off. Over here you can see the column, and kind of a clever little thing, the power supply is hidden inside the base of the column. The power supply is a 48 volt 350 watt supply. That feeds pretty much all the stepper drivers and all that. Inside the main cabinet in the bottom we have a RF EMI filter for the main power that comes in. We have just a bunch of buses of wire connectors. We got some fuses, some relays, stuff like that. And up here we have the brushless DC motor driver board, or BLDC motor controller. This is a 1200 watt motor controller. I looked it up online. And so this controls the actual spindle motor itself. And then over here we've got a lead shine 3-axis stepper motor driver. So this controls the X, the Y, and the Z axis, and that's an MX3660. And that's a pretty common driver and actually a really nice one. So it's kind of cool to see that in there. Everything's very neatly laid out. You've got the main on-off switch over here, and just everything's really nice and organized. Everything's labeled really well, so if you have to do anything with it, it's all labeled. The other nice thing is, inside here, we have the electrical schematic of everything. So it's in this nice little pouch that was tucked away in the side. So if you ever open this up for an issue, you got this. So this is a full piece of paper that shows all the electrical connections inside the cabinet, which is really cool that it's tucked away inside there. I was kind of looking for it in the manual and it wasn't there. It bummed me out a little bit. Open it up, here it is. So I'm curious to see how like the 4th axis is going to work, since this is an all-in-one 3-axis controller, if they're just going to add a second controller. Leadshine does also make like the 4660, I think it is, which is the 4-axis version. So I don't know if you just have to swap out the 3-axis for the 4-axis or add an additional axis. We'll see how that goes. But everything's nice and laid out, clearly labeled, so good on Tormach for that. Now that the mill's set up, it's time to start making some stuff.